Well, I read more books in September than I thought I did. Hey friends, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. My name is April if you've never been here before, and today we're going to do my September wrap up. Now, I ended up reading 15 books. I don't know how. I don't remember reading 15 books. To be honest, I DNF'd a few, but it was definitely a lot more than I thought I did. I ended up reading 4 Sleepy Hollow books this month. So I don't want to talk about those quite yet. We'll save those for that vlog. But other than that, I think I have like 11 books to talk to you about today. And I'm going to do things a little bit different. Instead of telling you about them chronologically, how I read them, we're going to go from the worst to the best. We'll save the best for last, of course. So let's start off with the one DNF that I have that was not a Sleepy Hollow book. So my first book that I DNF'd in September was Lady Lenn and the Mysterious Mac, and this is by Rose Prenderville. This was an ARC that I did request. I thought the cover was adorable. The synopsis sounded really cute. However, the reason that I DNF'd this is because the father of one of the main characters and the heroine herself have very serious medical issues. The heroine starts passing out and bleeding, like getting nosebleeds and stuff. And then the father also is extremely weak and it seems like he's going to die at any moment. He seems terminal. It does kind of sound like he has like breathing issues, maybe asthma, something like that, that they just don't know what it is. However, I could not read about that. For some reason, it was really starting to trigger my anxiety. So I just was like, you know what? I'm not going to read this book. But this is a book too. It did seem like it was going to be full of banter. Like I was enjoying the characters when they weren't having medical things. But I couldn't read any further personally. I am kind of still curious about this author and maybe even reading the first book in this series because it is kind of like a Highlander Scottish type of series, but this one just didn't work for me. And I actually have a 1-star book. I won't say never, I rarely rate things 1 star. Just don't think books are that bad usually. But this one was, and that was my weird ass romance pick for our very first book, and that is Hornado. Listen, okay, if you're going to write weird, if you're gonna write unique, if you're gonna write ridiculous, you need to go all the way with it, and this just didn't do that. This cover looks like she's gonna get it on with a tornado, right? Like we are expecting tornado things to happen to this girl. They don't happen. In fact, you see the tornado for about that much of the book. It's extremely disappointing. This book instead is more like a Revenge of the Nerds type thing. These scientist men, boys really, are in the mountains that devise a device that can control weather to bring the women who have gone to like a horror reform place, like literally that's what it's called, down the road. They want to create this weather phenomenon, this tornado, to basically bring them to them so that they can have a wild night together. And honestly, it wasn't as wild as we all wanted, I wanted, and it was just kind of disappointing all over. It was very much like a frat guy wrote this. Basically, this book did not deliver, and that is exactly why it got a 1 star. And then I have 3 3-star books, and most of these are honestly just disappointing 3 stars. They're not bad books by any means, but I definitely expected more from them. The first being My Road to Ruin, which is Erica Ridley's 4th installment in the Wild Winchesters series. I really do enjoy this kind of do-gooder, found family caper style type of thing. Lord Adrian is supposed to be stealing these artifacts from other countries because there's a war going on with Napoleon, so nobody can kind of leave the country. And instead of stealing them, he recreates them, and he's kind of an art caper type person. And so he gets in kind of hot water with the bad guy, and he has to create fake currency. So that's how the Winchesters kind of get a hold of this. And Marjorie comes in trying to help the bad guy out and Lord Adrian create better fake currency because she can see, you know, issues with the coins that are being circulated. And she's really trying to infiltrate them and work with Lord Adrian. They have a lot of banter back and forth. And honestly, the book is quite quirky and quite cute. Lord Adrian is an absolute unapologetic rake, and I love that. However, the book takes so long for our two main leads to even get together that I was kind of bored in the beginning of it. Once they do get together, that's what kind of saved this book for me, and that's why I ended up giving it a 3-star. There are some, really great banter. There's some hedgehog antics going on here, so if you love hedgehogs, there you go. If you love rakes, there you go. I mean, I love a good rake, so Lord Adrian was just perfect for me. Also, the heroine is incredibly intelligent and not scared of anything, which was fantastic for me. Another 3-star, there was an arc. I hate giving arcs 3 stars. I want to love them all because I request them. But this one was The Duke Gets Desperate by Diana Quincy. I love Diana Quincy's books, but ultimately this one hasn't been my favorite. There are some really compelling elements in this, however, that really maybe you will enjoy more than I did. Raya inherits a castle from her long-lost aunt. The Duke of Strickland is irritated by this because he should have inherited the castle because he never knew about Raya. And so they're immediately at odds with each other. Of course, this castle or this property is crumbling. I love a good crumbling ducal estate. He owns the land and she owns the castle. She is an incredible entrepreneur, so she's trying to find various ways for the castle to make money so they can make these necessary repairs. And the Duke of Strickland is just like, you can't do that. That's not how things are done. He's very traditional in that sense. But right off from the beginning, they have this incredible attraction to each other and they just love to fight. So this whole book, I would say the majority of the book, is very dialogue based, and the banter back and forth is just lobbying, boom, 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 back and forth. And sometimes they even are kind of antagonistic to each other just for the sake of being antagonistic, which I was like, it started getting a little old for me. But ultimately, I loved both of these characters. There are some really good spicy scenes in this, which I think Diana Quincy really amped it up for this book, but it worked for this book. I love when a hero is incredibly blunt and vulgar, and the heroine loved that too. So that was a shining moment in this book. But the kind of miscommunication, not really miscommunication, but maybe misinterpretation trope for this is kind of how the plot goes in a lot of ways. And it was just kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, you're misinterpreting what he said again. And it's just like, can you please not? Also, the villain in this book, there is a villain in this book because there's this subplot that is trying to sabotage everything Raya does. Villain is a little too mustache twirly for me, and sometimes I like that. In this one, I didn't really like that so much. The book overall is quite enjoyable, especially if you love, again, great banter, a historical with some spicy moments, that kind of thing. And just, again, this blunt, vulgar Duke and a very strong-willed woman. You probably will like this. And my last 3-star is actually Seduced by the Pumpkin Spice Latte. I read this because Autumn suggested it in our weird ass romance book club when Hornado wasn't doing it for us. And this one was quite more, like, much better compared to that one. Basically, this whole book makes fun of like white girls loving pumpkin spice lattes. Like that's it. That's the whole thing. She loves it so much she wants to get it on with it. And ultimately she becomes like a pumpkin spice sexual. She finds like her people. But why I think it got a 3 is, again, it just wasn't weird enough. We were all hoping the pumpkin spice latte would be like sentient and start talking to her through like the, you know, the like picture graphics that they do on top of the foam. I would have loved it if like the pumpkin spice latte was like talking to her through picture graphs or emojis or something. But some parts of the book was really funny. Like she was caressing herself with pumpkin spice latte. You know, the cardboard thing on the outside, she was like rubbing it against her face and her body. It was hilarious. But ultimately it just, that stuff didn't happen. Like the latte was not sentient. She just really liked it. It turned her on, and ultimately she found other people that get turned on by pumpkin spice lattes too. So that was that whole book. Good thing these are short, because even when they're bad, they're not incredibly terrible. So they're still fun to read with friends. Then I had 2 4-star reads for September. The first being The Duchess and the Wolf by Lydia Drake. In this one, Rafe Winters. God, I love a Duke or whatever named Rafe in historical romances. They're like, all the Rafes are great. Rafe is trying to break into the upper echelons of society for his club. Right now it's just kind of like a glorified brothel, and he wants to really entertain the top tier ton of Mayfair. And in doing so, he hires Susanna, and Susanna really just wants to practice her music. She plays the piano and she's incredibly good and gifted in it. And so she dresses up like Little Red Riding Hood, and he's of course the Wolf of Mayfair, so it's a bit of a Red Riding Hood retelling. And they make this deal that she'll play in his club with a mask and a cape on, to protect her reputation, of course, and he'll pay her some money for it, so that way she doesn't have to marry someone and she can run off and practice her art in another country at some point. And of course, through this deal, they fall in love. Again, this is a book with great banter. They bicker and challenge each other, but there is this intense longing and pulling towards each other that I really felt. I really enjoyed this book overall. The romance really worked for me in this, and I really hope the next book is with the friend, which I won't say who that is because I don't want to spoil anything, but I really enjoyed this book so much, and I can't wait for the next one, and I can't wait to see what Lydia Drake comes up with next. The other 4-star is from a new author. Her name is Ariella Isabella, and the book is The Blood is Life. This is kind of like a prequel to a set of novellas that will be coming out for this story. So there is no HEA in this one, so just be aware, but it is like a gothic horror romance, kind of. A handsome stranger walks up to Grace in a coffee shop, and immediately he's like, I want you. And she should walk away, but you know what? He's handsome, and she's like, I could use a one-night stand. Let's do it. So later they meet up at the coffee shop, and he takes her back to his house. She kind of wakes up later. She has no memory of what happens. She's throwing up everywhere. She's incredibly sick, and thus starts this incredible Final Girl style horror element to this whole thing. And where this story goes was so interesting. I will tell you that this book kind of needs a little bit more editing. Like, I just think it needs a little bit more tweaks here and there. However, the potential for this I saw was so great. Like, I absolutely loved the like slasher Final Girl style survival story of this, and it was full of blood and gore, and I can totally see where it's going and how maybe she's gonna get her HEA in future novellas or future books. I really was intrigued by this. That's why I gave it 4 stars. I think, again, the potential this author has and the way she's writing is incredibly great. I believe Ariella was like the assistant or something to Carissa Broadbent, so I can definitely tell where some of those influences are in this book. And if you are a lover of like gothic horror or Carissa Broadbent's work, but maybe in a little bit of a smaller package and a lot more action, check this one out. Honestly, I think it's worth it. It's only 76 pages and it takes you on a ride. So go on this ride. I think it's great. And then I had 4 5-star books. I feel like one of them I've already talked about a lot. In fact, I thought I read it last month, but I don't know, Goodreads told me I read it early September. So that one is An Earl to Remember. That is the Overboard retelling from Stacey Reed. It's great, it's fun. Just read it and see what you think about it. It's so cute. You'll really love it. It's light and fluffy and just fantastic, and it perfectly matches Overboard. If you've ever watched that movie, watch the movie as well. It's really good. And then my next 5-star was Knockout by Sarah McLean. I was so happy to give this 5 stars because it is one of my most anticipated books of the year, like honestly. This is Imogen and Tommy's story. Imogen is like the firecracker of the group of the Hellspells. She is the explosive one, literally. She does all the explosives for it. And Tommy is the Scotland Yard detective trying to figure out who is blowing up all these buildings around town. And Imogen and her team are also have that goal, but you know, of course, Tommy thinks it's her and she keeps telling him, nope, it's the other guy. So again, incredible banter. The audiobook is fantastic of this. Definitely recommend checking out the audiobook of this. You will just be incredibly enraptured in this story and this love story romance between Imogen and Tommy. Tommy is just head over heels with Imogen the entire time. He falls first for sure. And Imogen is just that plucky, quirky girl that you always love in historical romance. Oh, also one of the shining elements of this, Imogen, like every time she feels something, she relates it to like the sound of a bomb or a firecracker or something. And it's so good. I love it. Another 5-star book that I read in September was Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent. Somehow I knew this would be 5 stars because I can't not love Carissa Broadbent's books. I just can't. They just take me to places that I just want to go. I don't love a slow burn, but Carissa writes a slow burn that just keeps me going. It keeps me intrigued in a way that other slow burns just don't. Selena has sacrificed everything for her goddess, including her eyesight. She sees in a different way, and she is tasked to kill the vampire conqueror who basically killed her entire family. In order to kill him, she's tasked with kind of becoming his seer and infiltrating his army. She does this, and as she's going along with his army and defeating her own lands, and he's conquering her own lands to potentially be king of her country, she kind of slowly goes from seeing maybe that he's not the worst guy that she's ever thought he was, and that he does have good parts to him. He's definitely a conqueror. In fact, he doesn't say a lot of things to her. He's definitely not like a one-word hero type of person, but he keeps it short. And of course, throughout this journey, they start to see each other in different lights and they start to fall for each other. And it's really, really good. It's so good. I loved it. And my last 5-star and my last book for this wrap up overall is a book that's not even coming out until February. So sorry, it's well in advance, but I want to talk about this one because it's so good. Like, I really, really loved it. I might be completely biased about this, but it is the brand new book from Daniel L. Jensen, and it is called A Fate Inked in Blood. If you have watched the shows, The Vikings or The Last Kingdom, this will be right up your alley. Like, honestly, it is an incredibly slowly building story and definitely the first part of a multi-book series. So just keep that in mind if you do read this. The reason that I wanted to review it this early, not only did I like excitedly get like my wish granted on NetGalley, I was so surprised that happened because I was for sure thinking I was gonna get a big fat no for this book. But I do think that the book could use a little bit more tweaking and buttoning up the story because it is pretty slow, even though there's definitely the hills and the valleys of the plot going in and out as you kind of go along with the main characters. But ultimately, I really, really loved it. And anyways, let me tell you what it's about. Basically, this book is about Freya, and Freya is touched by the gods. She has a bit of God's blood, and that means she has a little bit of power, God's power. In this book, gods and goddesses are very, very heavily featured. So just be aware of that. At some point, the Jarl wants to marry her as one of his wives, so that way he has kind of seen this prophecy that she's going to help him rise to power and unite the clans. So he's constantly like, oh, you're being tested to do this. Go figure that out. And if you survive, hey, the prophecy is coming true. This Jarl makes his son kind of her bodyguard in a lot of ways. So Bjorn, the son, and Freya go through a lot of these trials together, and there's several, and they're really fun, and you kind of see how they're a little bit reluctant teammates here, and I love that dynamic as well. Bjorn has some of his own agenda going on that you're kind of intricately trying to figure out, and there's a lot of people fighting for Freya in this, wanting to either kill her or take her for themselves, so she's constantly like under siege and everything. But if you're a fan of the Bridge Kingdom and Vikings and the Last Kingdom, that kind of stuff, you will just love this. You will just love this. Daniel L. Jensen, of course, is an incredible fantasy romance writer, and this is no exception right here. I absolutely loved it. Anyways, those are all the books that I read for September. Let me know if you read any of these or what were your favorites as well from September. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!